Hello, music lovers of the world. Welcome to episode 52 of What Makes This Song Special, the show where every week I bring you a song. I talk about what makes that song special to me, why it reminds me of something in my life, something significant. I ask you to leave a comment about what that significance may be to you for that song. I'll talk a wee bit about the singer, a wee bit about the song, and yeah, a little story. I'll follow up in part two with my own cover version of the song. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share. Be nice to get some more viewers, some more comments. This week we're going back to spring 1996. I was 14 at the time. At this point, we hadn't lived in Italy for nearly 4 years. I'm basing this on the fact that people know a wee bit of the backstory from watching previous episodes. If you haven't, I apologise, but I moved back and forward a lot when I was a kid and lived in Italy, between Italy and Scotland. So, yeah, you can go back to previous episodes if you're interested, which you may not be. But yeah, at this point, we'd been for a couple of holidays in between, in these 4 years of a sort of sabbatical from living there. This visit was technically a holiday, but I think really for my mum and dad, once again, it was to have another look to see if they thought we could make some sort of business venture out there. It was just always our dream to stay there, and it just never really became possible. So I think we did about 3 months or so on this trip, which, as I said, was, I think, sort of supposed to be a holiday, but ended up staying for quite a while. So when we arrived back in the little town of Villa Latina in the mountains of Lazio, there was this huge excitement in the town because a new football pitch had been built. And this was a serious upgrade from Il Campo Sportivo Vecchio, which was the old ground, which was along the river from my grandparents' house, next door to a sheep and goat farm, which meant that the animals played there when we weren't around. It had these rusty, beat up goalposts. Parts of the grass that weren't overgrown were completely scorched from the intense sunshine. And yeah, I loved that old ground. That old ground was where I played my first ever games of football. But this new ground was, potentially going to be just this amazing structure, amazing opportunity for us all to play. And as soon as I met my old friends from the village that I hadn't seen in a while, it was the first thing they all wanted to talk about. It was a proper stadium. This was, there's a stand, turnstiles. In typical Italian fashion, someone had spent big money on something that would never have a financial return. This facility definitely got built due to somebody owing somebody else money, or some money laundering, or somebody being paid in a roundabout way, tax loopholes, that sort of thing. Because a town as small as Villa Latina should never have had a football stadium as big as this in it. But it was, I say stadium, it wasn't massive, but it was a proper football pitch with some stands and turnstiles, as I said, and a kind of yeah, it was awesome. It was just an awesome facility, especially back then, thinking back to what was the norm, back in the mid-90s. But, we didn't care about the sort of potential corruption that was behind this structure being erected. The idea of a Lazio football club training facility and boys club opening up on our doorstep was the stuff of dreams, and as a kid, even bigger, at the time, mid-90s, Serie A was the biggest and best football league in the world, probably the most dominant league that football has ever seen, to be honest. I mean, every player in the world who wanted to show their worth moved to Serie A. There wasn't a team in the league at the time who didn't have at least one or two, standout superstars in it. And Lazio were, of course, you're a huge club. They're a huge European club. A name synonymous with players like Signori, Mancini, Mihailovic, Gaza, Salas, Casiraghi, many others. This was a big deal. It was a huge deal. And from the moment we heard the rumour, I prayed that we would still be there in time to get a trial. And as luck would have it, a few days after landing back in the village, we were told we could go for trials. So, long story short, I got in along with a couple of my good pals from the village and some boys we hadn't met before from sort of neighbouring villages. We were playing for the boys club, and this was just this amazing, dream. It was an amazing feeling. Obviously, as I've said in previous episodes, I'm a lifelong Juventus fan, but it was still awesome being part of a Lazio youth setup. It was amazing, and we got to meet this coach who came in. The coach, he made us call him Mister, and I think that's a term in Italian football kind of goes back to the days of football being this English sport that kind of made its way around the world, and some of the references are English references. Mister or Mister is a sort of sign of respect that you show when you talk to your manager, so we call him Mister. And he's a nice guy, but he was tough when he had to be. I remember one night I was out at the bar with some of my pals. And bars in Italy are they're kid friendly, they're child friendly. I mean, it's not like in many other countries where it's like a kind of adult only affair. We were allowed to go up to the bar at any point in our youth. And one of the boys though that night had ordered a couple of bottles of Heineken. And I always remember it being Heineken because the lads were so chuffed that they had, real beer, and not the cheap Italian stuff, because that was considered, rubbish stuff. Fast forward 10 years and Peroni, Nastro Azzurro, Moretti, are all, some of the most famous beers in the world. But back then Italy was, very much a wine country, and people in Italy, I think, always considered Italian beer as being kind of cheap. It was cheap, it was pennies, or lira, very few lira back then. But I think all my mates, they kind of considered beer or real beer as being something that came from Germany or from Holland. So we had some packets of San Carlo crisps opened up on the table, and a few of the boys are trying their first taste of beer. I wasn't interested in trying the alcohol, but I was enjoying the evening. And the next thing I know, Mister, the coach, walks out the bar with, an ice cream in each hand, and he goes absolutely bananas when he sees us. He's raging and speaking so quickly in sort of Italian dialect that I can't even work out what he's saying. And my best mate at the time, Luca D'Agostino, turns to me and he says, "We're training tomorrow at 5:30. He's punishing us." So I remember going home that night and I tell my mum and dad that I need a lift to training the next morning at half 5 in the morning. And I play dumb as to why I don't want, because I don't want to tell them that my mates were drinking beer at 14 years old. So I have to try and just say, I don't know, the coach came into the bar and he seemed annoyed and he said we've all to be there at 5:30. So the next morning we turn up at 5:30. It wasn't long light, and Meester is there with the punishment. And the football pitch was like at the foot of the mountains. Where we stayed in Italy was like a valley surrounded by mountains. And the punishment was that he wanted us to run up to a town that was up the mountain called Picinisco and take a drink from the well and then run back. And none of us believed him. I think we just kind of followed him and started running, thinking, okay, he'll make us run a mile and then, that'll be it. And now I did a Google Maps of this run just to prepare for this episode, because I was thinking, maybe this is a lot bigger in my memory as a kid than it is, in reality. So I did a Google Maps, and actually it would have been about 2 miles each way, even though he never took us right to the top to Picinisco. It would have been about 2 miles each way with almost an 1,000-foot incline on the way up. And he made us train on the pitch when we get back to the bottom. We played football at the bottom, so absolute madness. The guy was a nutter. But the following week, Mum and Dad decided that we were going to Rome for a day trip, and unfortunately it coincided with one of my training days, or a game day. I can't remember if it was a training day or a game day, but I was gutted to miss it. But Mum and Dad wanted us to go for a family day out in Rome, which was the kind of nearest city to where we stayed. And we had a great day. We ate insane amounts of ice cream and pizza, and we saw some of the amazing sights that you see in Rome. It's like maybe the greatest city in the world. And we get back from Rome and we pull into the piazza where our house is, and my pal Luca was sitting on the doorstep of our house, and he just looking like he'd been waiting for us for hours, and he had these little bits of paper in his hands, and he went on to tell me that some of the Lazio players had visited the training as a surprise and I'd missed it, which of course I was absolutely devastated at. And so devastated that, being the great pal that he was, he gave me his autographs to keep. So he had like this checkered paper with these autographs. And I'll put some pictures up, because I actually went into my loft to find, I'd always kept them as a keepsake in a box in the loft, and I searched and searched and searched today, and the loft was roasting today because it's so warm here. And but I found them, so I will do some screenshots and leave some pictures of them in the corner. But there was like Zeman, who was the coach at the time of Lazio. There was Orsi and Mancini, who were the goalkeepers. Marcolin, Di Matteo, who was, who'll always be famous for his time at Lazio, but also as the guy who then played for Chelsea and coached Chelsea, the Champions League. Cristiano, there was a guy called Cristiano, I don't remember who that was, and there was an autograph from Gottardi, who was also a really good player back then. So, awesome. And it was a magical opportunity, just one that my pals in Glasgow wouldn't believe. I remember coming back to school and saying, I played for Lazio Boys Club for 3 months there when I was away, and of course they didn't believe me, because it just seemed like there were probably loads of these youth setups all over the region of Lazio. So it wasn't as big as it sounded, but, it was a cool brag. It was a cool thing to say, I played for Lazio Boys Club. It sounded bigger than it probably was. But anyway, it's, for some reason, everywhere we went at that time in my life, there was a song that was playing. Of course, we have to link it to a song. And the song was Chris Rea, The Road to Hell, part 2, technically, because there's this like big long introduction to that song called part 1. We'll just call it The Road to Hell, but it's technically part 2. But it was on in the supermarkets we went to, it was on the bars we went to for breakfast, it was on the adverts on the television, it was on every time we switched on the radio in the car. And the thing that kind of sums up Italy was that it had also been on everywhere when we lived there 4 years earlier. And it also reminds me of that time too. It reminds me of living there 4 years earlier when I was in primary school. But there's another song for that story, and that's another story for another day. There were notable mentions for today's episode from Scatman John, the song Scatman, or Ski Bap Bap or whatever it was called. And then Robert Miles' Children, of course, which was a huge hit at the time as well. And they definitely remind me, maybe even more so than today's song, of the actual, the Lazio playing days. But both of them are pretty far removed from the possibilities of me doing a piano and vocal cover, as you can probably imagine if you know the songs I'm talking about. So Rea's song will always remind me of so many great times out there. I don't know why it was such a big hit in Italy, that song, but there's a kind of real irony for me of that song being called The Road to Hell, because for me it really was the road to paradise, an amazing chapter in my childhood, which, just look back on and just think it was perfect, just amazing, absolutely amazing. So there's my wee story. I'll talk a wee bit about the song. Chris Rea wrote the song while stuck in traffic on the M44 motorway in England, which connects London to the southwest coast. At a standstill for over an hour, he got the idea for this song, and he wrote the lyrics in his car at the intersection of the M25. I feel his pain, because having driven or been a passenger in a car on that road or roads like that, English motorway, I don't think there's a more boring stretch of road in Europe. It just all looks the same. There's no scenery really. It's kind of like often grey skies. I'm painting a really bad picture here of Britain, but for about 8 solid hours, there's just really nothing to see on that road. It's just a very mundane drive. So the Road to Hell sort of sums it up. And I think there are other reasons why he called it the Road to Hell. I think he talked about, he imagined the ghost of his mum coming and telling him that he was on the wrong he was on the wrong road, you know, that kind of metaphor for like on the wrong tracks for life and stuff like that. So really cool track, lyrically, musically. It's just really bluesy. It reached number 10 in the UK charts, but as I said before, it became like a huge hit all over the world in terms of, you know, just becoming a song that everybody knew. It was just on everywhere, all over Europe and all over the world. As always, I talk a wee bit about the singer's voice. Chris Rea's voice is an interesting one. He's not got a huge range, and he sings mostly with a very low, almost spoken style, which is why I'm going to sing my cover version of Road to Hell up a full octave, because I can't get down to those awesome low notes that Chris Rea gets down to. I just can't. My voice doesn't resonate down there. It doesn't even get down there, never mind resonate. It's just too low for me. But for Chris Rea, that's where his voice is at its best. It's where we call the tessitura is in singing. He has this really cool, soulful storyteller voice that really pulls you into the lyrics. And his voice really matches his guitar playing style. It's that mellow, bluesy, full of feel, just, you know, cold as ice. Really cool voice. So there's my story. That's why the song's special to me. It reminds me of those awesome times in my youth. Why is the song special to you? Please tell me a wee story in your comments. Leave a comment. Let me know what the song means to you. Does it remind you of something happy, something sad? You know, music always reminds us of times in our life. So tell me about it in the comments. Please hit the subscribe button. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. It has taken way longer than I thought it would. It's a tough road, YouTube. So yeah, lots of subscribes would be really appreciated. Some likes, some shares, some comments would really help the sort of algorithm push me. And I'll be back next week with another song, another story, another singer. And thank you so much for